and its predecessors have always been committed to change and progress in the interest of the people. This commitment remains a trust and a duty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan, for that. Hi, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming to the event, hosted and organized by the Toronto Association for Peace and Solidarity. My name is Jared, and I'm the co-chair with TAPS, along with Mandan, who will be moderating tonight. Thank you, Mandan. And I'm sure we're all very excited to hear Iraklis talk about Trump, NATO, and the state of the international peace movement. First, I wanted to say a few words introducing TAPS and the work that we've done in the last year, as well as a little bit of what we're working on in the next year. I joined TAPS. I joined the executive committee of TAPS in January of 2023, and in the last year and a quarter, I've organized and co-organized a number of anti-imperialist actions with a focus on combating NATO from the home front. TAPS led a rally last April against NATO aggression in Eastern Europe and West Asia, which was attended by about a dozen peace-loving groups in the city, with the clear demands that Canada must leave NATO. We also organized a successful banner drop over the DVP, which flew over a weekend denouncing the current imperialist drive to war. We also organized and hosted a public meeting last fall, which functioned as a sort of teach-in on NATO imperialism and the costs for member states like Canada, hosted by our very own Dave McKee. I'm sure that we'll hear more about that bloodstained alliance from the executive secretary in just a couple of minutes. TAPS organized a very well-attended event last June with the Canada-Cuba Friendship Association, hosting guest speakers from the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the People, which was part of a much larger, very successful cross-Canada peace tour. TAPS, as part of our anti-imperialism, maintains a steadfast commitment to the sovereignty of states, especially in the face of Yankee imperialist aggression. So we stand firm in our support of the Cuban people's right to self-determination. TAPS members also regularly attend the monthly rally in front of the U.S. consulate, demanding the illegal blockade on Cuba be lifted. TAPS executives include a prominent member on the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Day Committee, and members held down a table at the last few remembrances of the only time nuclear weapons have been deliberately dropped on a civilian population. TAPS is most valuable in the peace movement through injecting our anti-imperialist politics into otherwise well-meaning people who might have an imperialist blind spot. One cannot oppose the bomb without opposing imperialism. I'm also pleased and saddened to say that in the last year and a half, TAPS members and TAPS has regularly attended the many weekly demonstrations demanding a ceasefire and an end to the Israeli genocide in Palestine. The carnage in West Asia is nearly entirely propped up by Western imperialist interests, and so the people of North America have a key role in supporting the Palestinians and their right to resist, specifically through advocating for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions on the regime which has caused so much destruction in the region. BDS was a key tactic in dismantling the South African apartheid regime, and TAPS has helped in our own small way advocating for a revival of similar tactics. TAPS members are also prominent in the various Ridings for Palestine groups throughout the GTA, building up the peace movement in our very own neighborhoods. This year, as TAPS elected a new executive at our annual general meeting and committed ourselves to a monthly in-person action. Last month, we postered and leafleted in the University Rosedale riding demanding that peace be on the ballot this election. We have a lot planned for the rest of the year, continuing our monthly actions and planning larger events such as people hearings on NATO spending, which will culminate in the summer. Now, one final thing before I leave the floor to Iraklis. Events such as these are not without their costs, and we urge you, if you can, to please donate to the organization. It really would help out. Our capacity is limited, but with some financial support, we can continue working to broaden the peace movement in the future. Again, I truly urge you all to give something small if you can, and I will be the first to place a donation. So on behalf of the Executive Committee of the Toronto Association for Peace and Solidarity, we thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jared. This is a beautiful turnout, and I think that this turnout speaks to the authority that our guest speaker has on the issue of peace. But I think the turnout is also reflective of the urgency of the issues that we're going to be discussing tonight. As Jared pointed out, one of the big themes for TAPS this year is going to be making the connection of military spending to NATO membership. Obviously, this is a huge task, especially given every single major political party in this country is united in accelerating military spending to meet that NATO 2% target. For some context, this would more than double Canada's already bloated military budget to over 80 billion in the next 5 years. And as if this wasn't enough, maybe shockingly or not shockingly, to the south, President Trump has called on member states to push military spending to 5% of GDP. This would push Canada's military spending well above $200 billion, which is simply unconscionable. But this is what's in the air from world leaders right now. In fact, I've been reading in the pages of the Toronto Star, which some of you know I'm a subscriber to, and I've been following the Liberal leadership race. And it seems each candidate, whether it be Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland, are tripping over one another to promise getting to this 2% mark faster than the last. And this is coming at a time when working people are experiencing one of the worst cost of living crises in a generation, with tens of billions of dollars that is being promised to arms manufacturers and corporate interests abroad. This is going to divert desperately needed billions towards social issues like housing, healthcare, education, reconciliation, and climate action. And I hear many on the left saying that the costs of this increased military budget will be borne by working people. What's implied here is that the effects will be felt in the future, like the coming tenths. But we're here tonight to tell you that the effects are being felt by working people already today. 2.5 million people in Ontario don't have access to a family doctor. A few of you may have seen some of the 80,000 who are living homeless in Ontario on your way to this event tonight. We live in a situation where recipients of the Ontario Works Ontario Disability Support Program are living in legislated poverty. Student loan debt in Canada is sitting at about $24 billion. And are we given solutions, concrete solutions to these issues? No. We were given 88 fighter jets, F-35s, with an initial price tag of $19 billion. The promise of the militarization of the Arctic against enemies, I'm not sure exactly who, maybe the Irish, I'm not sure. We're faced with the militarization of the police, and increasing policing budgets are happening across municipalities across the country. And friends, we're facing a federal election where these issues must be addressed. But sadly, they won't be. The rise of Donald Trump, the drive towards militarism, NATO expansionism, will undoubtedly fuel wars of aggression, new arms races, racism, fan the flame of climate crisis, and there are no voices for genuine peace in government. But it's not all doom and gloom. We can build extra parliamentary political action for peace, like we're doing here tonight. And we need to force our elected representatives to take our concerns seriously. In short, we need to make peace an election issue. And I hope that we can start doing this tonight. But you didn't come here to hear my petty grievances as Western imperialism. You came here to hear Iraklis unpack some of the issues. Trump 2.0, the role of NATO as the armed wing of US imperialism, and the state of global peace. Iraklis is the executive secretary of the World Peace Council, representative of the Greek Committee for International Détente and Peace at the World Peace Council, and he was elected previously as the president of the World Federation of Democratic Youth from 1999 to 2003. So please join me in welcoming Iraklis.
So, dear friends, fellow fighters for a world of peace and social justice, dear comrades, I'm very pleased, personally and also on behalf of the World Peace Council, to be today here among friends who gathered upon the invitation of the Toronto Association for Peace and Solidarity, TAP. And it's a special pleasure to be in Canada after several years, which I didn't have the pleasure to visit your country. We share and we salute the genuine internationalist commitment and struggle of the peace-loving people in Canada on the side of the peoples who are struggling for their just causes, for their right to self-determination, against occupation, interference in their domestic affairs, against sanctions and blockades, against sovereign nations and peoples. We salute also your principled stand against the policies of the Canadian government, which on the one hand participates in all the reactionary imperialist plans and at the same time applies anti-people and anti-worker measures in the country. We are glad and proud to have in the World Peace Council from Canada a very prestigious member, the Canadian Peace Congress, as well as a member of the Executive Committee of the World Peace Council. We are glad that in our talks during my stay here in Canada, we even projected a possibility, we are exploring a possibility that the World Peace Council will hold next year in 2026 a regional continental meeting, which is the whole American and the Caribbean region here in Canada, and we are looking forward to such a possibility. Indeed, we are living in challenging and complicated times, whereas the enemies of peace are very powerful and openly executing their plans against the peoples of the world, against peace and stability. But, friends and comrades, is the main characteristic of the current times the fact that the United States of America has a new president, Donald Trump? We are very much aware, annoyed and alerted with the declarations of the US President Trump to incorporate or annex Canada into the USA or Greenland or Panama and so on. No doubt that such provocative statements are being rejected and denounced by the World Peace Council and by all peace-loving people in the world. And these very statements of the new US government are being rejected by all Canadian people, but also by the vast majority of the people in the United States itself. It becomes obvious that though the aggressive stand of the US administration is more about the profits and the share of US monopolies and big capital from the trade, profits from commerce and trade with its neighbors and globally. Some years ago, let me share one regarding this Trump issue, about Trump. Some years ago, a NATO summit took place in Brussels. That was during the first first term of Donald Trump in the White House. In Brussels, where the headquarters of this war machine of imperialism is based, as we all know. It was during the first term of Trump in the White House. Some forces in the peace movement then, and in particular from Belgium, decided to set up a slogan for the protest actions against NATO in that very summit, which was reading, "Trump not welcome." The World Peace Council disagreed strongly with that slogan and tried to convince of the multiply wrong slogan. We asked, what about if the US president would have been Hillary Clinton? What about the rest of the NATO leaders, which constantly always agree and sign unanimously all the NATO resolutions? And are all of them welcome, while Trump is not the welcome? The implications deriving from such intentional destruction and delusion served, amongst others, to the purpose to wash the other governments of the NATO member states clean, to not touch and denounce the European Union, which is hand in hand with NATO in all levels, and to not allow the peace movements to identify the real enemy of peace, which is imperialism and its armed wing, NATO. We know that this necessary clarification is common ground for all of us here. We just want, as World Peace Council, as an international organization of the anti-imperialist peace movements, to stress our view that the World Peace Council was not and is not complacent to any bourgeois government of capitalist states. We would deny our own history and struggles of millions of people if we would simplify things by wrong slogans. Dear friends and comrades, we are meeting today in extremely dangerous and complicated times for humanity and in general, and for peace and stability in the world. In many corners of the world, we are following conflicts, threats, imperialist interference, and destabilizations, even open wars of local or regional character. Most of the times, if not always, the causes for the above are the fierce drive for exploitation and control of energy resources, of markets and routes of transport, of spheres of influence in general. Competitive interests are clashing to the detriment of the peoples and their lives. During the year 2023, the global military spending exceeded the 2 trillion US dollars, whereas the United States is having the biggest share with approximately then 900 billion US dollars. The tendencies are negative, while we observe huge increase of military budgets in many countries, particularly in the NATO states, but also in Russia and China. Only one small part of this amount, of these 2 trillions, could solve major humanitarian problems of hunger, of curable diseases, and underdevelopment in the whole world at once. Dear friends, the region of Latin America continues being a focus point for US imperialism. The World Peace Council expresses its solidarity to the peoples struggling against the imperialist blockades, sanctions, and interference in Latin America and the world. In this context, Cuba, the island of the revolution with its brave people, is resisting the challenges posed by the economic, financial, and commercial blockade of the United States and its allies for more than 6 decades. The damage caused to Cuba in many fields does not allow the country to organize the import of fuel, of energy, of food and medical supplies. The serious problems with the electricity cuts and the energy supply system have heavy consequences for the daily life of the people. As World Peace Council, we are aware of the fact that the United States has never given up the efforts and maneuvers to destabilize the Cuban Revolution. It has never accepted that Cuba decided with the will of its people a different path of development. The WPC demands the end of the criminal blockade and continues demanding the deletion of Cuba from the list of states sponsoring terrorism. The political game of the Biden administration, which was well coordinated with the incoming Trump administration to remove Cuba for 1 week from the infamous list, shows only the arbitrary and ambiguous intention of the political US establishment. We express our solidarity to the Cuban people and government in defending the achievements of the revolution. The World Peace Council also demands the closure of the US base of Guantanamo and the return of the territory to its legal owner, the Cuban people. And look at the new element regarding Guantanamo, that US President Trump is considering to send the migrants when they will arrest them in the United States, to deport them not back to the countries where they came from, but to Guantanamo, where they have not only the US base, but also a concentration camp, which has never closed. The World Peace Council stood always firm on the side of the Venezuelan people and its will to defend its right to choose its own independent path of development. We have always rejected and fought against the imperialist interference in the domestic affairs of Venezuela by the United States and all its allies in the world. The unilateral, illegal, coercive actions and sanctions applied by the US against Venezuela are aiming at the asphyxiation of the country and its people, while reactionary forces are being sponsored inside the country for violent regime change. The US doctrine to impose sanctions against Venezuela, along with the cases of Nicaragua and Cuba, is of imperialist nature, considering Latin America its backyard. The recent US elections were actually a repetition of the scenario of previous elections. It is proved once more that regardless who is the resident of the White House, US imperialism has a strategy defending and protecting the interests of the multinationals and of big capital against the peoples of the world and against its own people. The particular style and openly business-driven and arrogant, cynical approach of Donald Trump is, of course, a serious matter of concern, but by no way can any peaceful-minded person grant any credit to the new US administration as a so-called peacemaker. The people around Trump even raise an issue. They're dreaming of a future Nobel Peace Prize for Trump after the supposed ceasefire in Palestinian Gaza Strip or the talks of the United States with Russia about an end of the war in Ukraine. But let us give a look on these two burning issues around the world, the situation in the Middle East and the NATO-Russia war on Ukrainian soil. Speaking about the unprecedented suffering of the Palestinian people, which face for more than 75 years occupation and displacement, the ongoing massacre of the Palestinian people by the Israeli occupation army and in all the Palestinian territories, but especially the Gaza Strip, there are no words to describe the brutality and inhuman actions of the Israeli army and its government. The ongoing crisis, despite the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, there is an ongoing crisis, did not really start on 7th of October 2023. Till the official ceasefire for Gaza, more than 45,000 Palestinians got killed, 1/3 of them children and 1/3 of them women. The Israeli army invaded hospitals and attacked civilians waiting for humanitarian aid. The Gaza Strip was always an open-air prison, but for the period of this aggression of Israel, it became actually an open-air graveyard for children. And this is a statement by the UN General Secretary Guterres himself. But the actions of ethnic cleansing and violent Israeli regime is now shifting its military operations to the West Bank. More than 40,000 Palestinians have been displaced forcefully from the refugee camps of Jenin and Tulkarem in the center and in the north and the center of the West Bank. In the 18 months of the aggression in the Gaza Strip, more than 1,000 Palestinians have lost their lives also in the West Bank. Another Gaza operation is on its way, but somehow in a slow motion. At the same time, the Israeli regime is witch hunting also its own citizens, especially the Palestinians inside Israel and other peace-loving forces who face the discrimination, the threats, and the persecution, even against members of the Knesset, the ones who belong to the Hadash and to the Communist Party, who denounce the genocide of the Israeli regime, who are expressing at the same time solidarity with the Palestinian people. All the above prove clearly that Israel is being converted more and more into an apartheid state inside Israel and towards the Palestinian people. We support the initiative of the South African government to file a case of the International Court of Justice for the crime of genocide committed by Israel. Israel and its occupation army is committing daily crimes of ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian people. We witnessed the last period also the escalation of the situation in the region, in the Middle East region, with the open attack of Israel on Lebanon and the ground invasion to the southern Lebanon, which has created new additional humanitarian crisis, whereas hundreds of thousands of Lebanese citizens and their families were forced to flee, facing the daily bombardment of Lebanese cities, including the capital, Beirut. The cruel and criminal assassinations of political leaders of Palestine and Lebanon by Israel, which have provoked the retaliation on the other side, and the massive airstrikes on Lebanese and Syrian targets by Israel, have caused huge destruction of civil infrastructure and a vicious circle of violence and war. The Israeli attacks on Iranian targets are shedding fuel into the fire, with the danger of a generalized war in the whole region and further. As World Peace Council, we consider the Palestinian issue as a key issue for the whole Middle East. Thus, we reaffirm our historical position for the end of the occupation of all Palestinian lands and the establishment of an independent and viable state within the borders of pre-4th of June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. It is the high time to stress and to fight for the recognition of Palestine as a full member state of the United Nations, and we demand the release of all Palestinian political prisoners from Israeli jails and reaffirm our support to the UN Resolution 194, upon which the right for return of the Palestinians to their homes is granted. The World Peace Council likewise demands the withdrawal of the Israeli occupation forces from the Syrian Golan Heights and the Lebanese territories. We want here to strongly and vehemently condemn the recent regime change in Syria. Regardless, any valid complaints and criticism against the previous regime, the political power was handed over to the armed religious fundamentalists, which earlier were called terrorists and now liberators by the United States, European Union, and their allies in the region. The deal made in Doha a week before the collapse of the regime, with the participation of all major global and regional forces, including the United States, Russia, Turkey, Israel, and the Gulf regimes, shows the hypocrisy and arbitrary approach towards the Syrian people who were never asked about their wishes. The Syrian people did not deserve this situation after so many years of imperialist interference, of sanctions, and of civil war. We express our deep concern about, in this context, about the neo-Ottoman role of Turkey in Syria and the expansions of the occupation by Israel on Syrian soil, demanding the withdrawal of all foreign troops from Syria. Now, about the NATO-Russia war on Ukrainian soil, which, as we know, or just a few days ago, has gone even beyond the 3 years, which is a matter of great concern for all peace-loving forces of the world and for the World Peace Council itself. We stated our view from the beginning that this war did not actually start on 24th of February 2022, highlighting the coup d'etat of 2014 in Kiev, whereas reactionary and pro-Nazi forces with the support of the United States and the European Union came to power. The harassment and attacks on the Russian-speaking population of the Ukraine in the Donbass and other places, the massacre of the trade union building on 2nd of May 2014 in Odessa by para-state forces of Ukraine, which were killing and burning and then executing demonstrators in front of the trade union building of Odessa, and the efforts of NATO to encircle militarily Russian Federation all these years. As World Peace Council, we stated clearly that NATO was planning to deploy heavy weapon systems and troops in the Ukraine by affiliating the country into NATO, which we always objected and condemned. We always opted for a political negotiated solution of the conflict, expressing our clear objection to any unilateral change of international borders as a principle of international law, and likewise, we objected and we expressed always our disagreement with any war for the sake of control of energy resources, of spheres of influence, to the detriment of the people and their prosperity. These are formulations of 3 years ago, repeated in these 3 years. And look at the situation where we are, where today we can see for what the war is about rare earths, about lithium, about cobalt, and so on. The peoples of Russia and Ukraine were living fraternally in peace together for more than 70 years in the framework of the USSR, achieving great progress in all fields. The dissolution of the Soviet Union, despite the referendum which took place in all the states of the USSR, including the Ukraine, favored overwhelmingly to maintain the USSR. But nevertheless, nobody paid attention to that or respected that. And actually, the restoration of capitalism in all the territories of the USSR opened the Pandora box for all later developments, including the expansion of NATO eastward. The United States, NATO, and the European Union have used this war in order to advance with their plans to secure interests and profits, geopolitical control of Eastern Europe against the competitive interests of emerging forces, such as China. The United States is benefiting from the sanctions against Russia by selling their expensive natural liquid gas, NLG, to Europe and the world. The governments of the US and of the European Union are using a war rhetoric supporting at the same time with billions of dollars and all kinds of sophisticated weapons the regime in Kiev. Another negative fact is that while Russia and we all objected the affiliation of Ukraine and also earlier Georgia into NATO, which could not be implemented earlier, now Sweden and Finland got affiliated to NATO, which was a dream of NATO which they could never think they could realize. It was a decades-long dream. NATO has advanced already in its decisions to deploy a minimum of 300,000 troops along the borders of Russia, which is a dangerous escalation in the war plans. The World Peace Council has historically a principled anti-imperialist stand. It has always revealed the criminal and offensive character of NATO and fought for the disengagement of the countries, the member states, from it and the dissolution of NATO as such on international level. The World Peace Council has never given any check and blank check to anybody in the international politics. Our convictions and principles have the interests of the peoples in its center, against the rule of the multinationals, of the monopolies and their profits, against the enemies of peace who serve the above. The plan to deliver, for example, long-range ballistic missiles to Ukraine and to strike by that Russian cities are proof for these plans. NATO celebrated last year 75 years of its existence, which is proof of having been full of crimes, wars, military coups, and colored revolutions. It is expanding its radius year by year with strategic allies in all continents. It has here strategic allies in Argentina, in Colombia, in the continent. And it's declaring enemies and targets for its offensive strategy. NATO is converting itself into a global NATO. The US and the EU imperialists are hypocritically speaking about freedom and democracy when their only interest lies in the growth of the profits of their multinationals. The wars they initiate are fueling in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and they are creating misery, displacement, and millions of refugees. Let us give, coming to the end, a look to the latest developments regarding a possible peace deal as suggested by and proposed by US President Donald Trump with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. There cannot be any doubt that the motives behind this approach and talks are not related to the interests of the peoples in the region. Neither does the US, means the Russian and the Ukrainian people, neither does the US president hide his clear claims to take over the rich mineral resources of Ukraine and to give contracts to the US industry for the reconstruction of the country after the war. At the same time, new business deals and investments are being secretly negotiated for the Arctic and for Siberia, and for a possible invitation of Russia again to the G7 to make it a G8, which was always in the past the goal of Russia. Russia wanted to be part of the club, which was never welcome, but it was never welcome to it. International law does not matter, neither for the United States nor for Russia. The treatment of the Ukrainian president, as we saw on TV, President Zelensky, is actually the expected payment for a puppet of the West who shares huge responsibility for having prolonged all these years this war. Because it is clear that in the first talks 3 months after the beginning of the war in Istanbul and in Minsk, there would have even a better agreement, a better deal from Ukrainian perspective, and with the hundreds of thousands less dead people, dead soldiers, which died, plus the destruction of the whole area there. But if we would say that Putin and Russia started that war, one thing is sure: the ones who didn't want to end it was the other side, was NATO. Even if we would, which we say that there is a violation of international law by the unilateral decision of Russia. But the ones who didn't want to end with a political negotiated solution the war is the other side, is NATO and its puppet Zelensky. Russia in this deal, from its side, is securing important Ukrainian areas which have been incorporated or annexed into the Russian Federation, and stays in control of big part of the mineral resources which are there. And the long-standing allies of the United States in Europe, its NATO and EU members, are complaining for being kept out of the redistribution of this wealth in the Ukraine. The hypocrisy amongst the European imperialists is paramount. They are evidently crying for the betrayal by the United States and for the expected losses in spheres of influence and resources. This is rivalry and competition amongst the imperialists, and this is the particular Western imperialists who are now, competing and antagonizing themselves. The discussion about Trump as threat to democracy shows the fierce antagonisms, since they are equally warmongers and anti-democratic when it comes to their own interests. The European Union, NATO, and its governments are using cleverly this war for 3 years now to increase military expenditure, deployment of troops, missile defense shields along the borders with Russia, while hundreds of thousands of Russians and Ukrainians were dying in the battlefield. Reactionary theories were reinvented in this course about the bloodthirsty Russian bear, who was always seeking for blood and war and killings. In this way, they want to create a link, a bridge of the Red Army of the Soviet Union, which liberated Europe from fascism, which is this year 80 years anniversary, with the Russian army of the capitalist Russia today, and all together to put it under the bloodthirsty Russian bear, which is seeking for, for blood killing around. These are reactionary theories and actually efforts in the framework of rewriting also the history, falsifying and rewriting the history regarding the Soviet Union, the Russian army then as the Red Army, and the today. But unfortunately, this rewriting of and the falsification of history is not the sole privilege of the West. The Russian President Putin, in the beginning, in the first months of 2022, in order to invent or find arguments to justify the military presence of Russia in Ukraine, said that what is the Ukraine? The Ukraine is a result of a red coup, of a coup d'etat of the Bolsheviks, of Lenin. And by that, he was fueling the reactionary theories, which are 100 years old, of the times of Marshal Kerensky and the Tsar, and so on. Altogether, we would say, yes, the situation in the world is kind of weird. It is really strange, and many new elements which we couldn't anticipate or predict are in front of us. Nobody can easily foresee the concrete developments based on all the above, what we have said. But one thing is sure for us. The peoples have the ability to act and to impose changes, even to overthrow imperialist plans by the organized peace movement, the class-oriented trade unions, and the organized popular movement, because we believe that the enemies of peace seem to be powerful and omnipotent, but they are not invincible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Iraklis. There's going to be lots for questions, I'm sure, based on that presentation, but thank you very much. Before we get into questions, I want to just make a couple of announcements and financial appeal. International Women's Day, Friday, March 7th, from 7 to 9 p.m. at 25 Cecil Street, the United Steelworkers Hall. Theme is Women Resisting Imperialism. So if you like this event, there's going to be lots to enjoy there. Great speakers, musical performances. So please do what you can to come out to that event. I also wanted to highlight the next TAP membership meeting. All are welcome to come, and if you liked this event and the topics covered, I would encourage you to please do come to the membership meeting. This is going to be on March 27th, 7 to 9 p.m. at the OPSU Regional Office at 31 Wellesley Street. We're going to be discussing what we've been up to for the last year to date, plan actions for the federal election, and develop a working group for the people's hearings that Jared mentioned earlier on military spending versus desperately needed social programs like healthcare, education, and environmental protection. So please come out to that. And if you want to check in,
What was the date again, please?
Yeah, the date's March 27th, 7 to 9 p.m. But if anyone has any questions, just find me after and I can fill you in. Before we go to the questions, I want to once again highlight that events like this cost our small organization a lot of money. And we would very much appreciate a donation, which can be made via e-transfer, cash, or debit or credit. So there's really no excuse tonight. Rini and Jay at the literature table on the way out can tap your debit, take your cash, and help you with the e-transfer. So please see them on your way out. This is going to help with Iraklis' travel expenses, renting the space, and putting on more events like this in the future.
What about gold and jewelry?
We also take gold and jewelry. Yeah, thank you. Good point. Miguel, speaking of Miguel, we're going to present Iraklis with a little gift now. Please, Miguel, take it away.
Right, thank you. Right, so my name is Miguel Figueroa, and I've been asked by the executive of the Canadian Peace Congress to convey on behalf of our Congress and our chapters right across the country our deep appreciation to Iraklis for making this trip, at least to Eastern Canada. We haven't been able to get to the West Coast yet. Next trip, next time Vancouver. We spent several days in Montreal before coming down to Toronto at the invitation of our sister organization, the Mouvement Québécois pour la Paix. He attended, had a public meeting and also the annual general meeting of the MQP, and he's been with us for a few days. But altogether, it's about a week that was taken out of your schedule. And the reason I draw attention to that fact is that this guy is very, very busy. You know, as executive secretary of the World Peace Council, which has organizations in almost 100 countries. 90 countries around the world. He works like a Trojan. I mean, you know, it's absolutely tireless. And I know this personally. You know, first of all, let me just say it's been a great pleasure, but also an honor to get to know Iraklis over the past several years. With participating in the Solidarity mission to Venezuela, going to the executive meetings of the World Peace Council, and the recent peace assembly in Hanoi in 2022, November 2022. I know how hard he works, and I'll just give you one example of it. I wonder if you even sleep sometimes, because I periodically
try to figure out what the present would be with a description.
Yeah. Maybe some sleeping pills. a lot of us have WhatsApp, right? And so or some way of sending direct text messages. And I remember once I sent him a text message, and I forget about the time zone difference between Toronto and Athens. It's like 67 hours or something like that. So I sent it to him at 10 at night, and I figured, well, it's okay. He's going to check his phone the next morning or whatnot. But within 10 minutes, I get a response from him. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. In Athens. So we're greatly appreciative of your taking your time out from your busy schedule to come to us, and we wanted to express our appreciation. So, after that long interlude, we have for you this small carrying pack, which is indigenous, and you can see here it's very nice. And inside is a book which I haven't had a chance to read yet, but it's on my reading list. But it's just been published by an award-winning author, researcher, and journalist, Omar El Akkad. He was recently in town for a book launch here, and this new book, which just came out last month, I love the title of this book. One day, everyone will have always been against this. So they kept mum, they kept silent during this Holocaust and this genocide against the Palestinian people. But 10 or 15 years from now, they'll say, oh, yes, I always oppose this crime. So look at the graphic, the bomb dropping on it. I'm told that I wasn't able to attend his speech a few days ago, but I'm told that he gave a brilliant presentation. So I'm sure the book is very good as well. Small tokens of our appreciation. Please join me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's really, I don't want to take more time, friends and comrades, but I know and I respect very much, and I thank for the gift, and very thoughtful and very, I would say, also lovely, which shows also the personal relations with the people we work with, because it's not only political cooperation and commitment and sharing values and ideals. It is, as Miguel said, when we are working with our partners, with our member organizations in the world, we rely on them, we count on them, and we appreciate. And this gesture is very valuable to us, because it shows also that it's not just World Peace Council came and then leaves, but we will have something to remember, that this is from our visit to Canada and to Toronto, to the Canadian Peace Congress, and to TAPS. Thank you very much. Thank you. 25 minutes? Whatever.
Iraklis has agreed to take some questions, and I'm going to abuse my role as chair and kick it off, if that's okay with everyone. I hope this sparks the conversation a little bit, and then I'll take a speakers list and we can chat for 25 minutes. So Iraklis, how do we convince workers that their interests are synonymous with the anti-imperialist peace struggle when, for instance, some unions support Canada's role as a supplier of weapons to Ukraine and other places, and see arms manufacturing as a source of good jobs? Do you want to take a couple, or do you want to go?
Yes, let's take 2, 3.
So I got Dave here, and here, and then there. Go ahead, Dave.
So first, thank the reference. That was a lot of great information. Really, it needs to be shared with millions of people across the country. We're going to do our best. Second would be the United Nations that mentioned internet law for immigrants. At the same time, we know that there's been a distortion in the UN. That many, that's very well in report. Reform now in further version. But at the end of the day, I mean, UN is contradict. But at the end of the day, it needs to look for the architect. The architect. I mean, what do you think on what role is there a role for the U, is there a conflict with current, where is there?
Thanks, Dave. Here?
Thanks for your announcement. Great. Sure. What when you to really again when we for information to really look at the whole imperialist struggle in war. So I would here if you brief and
You want to stop there and then we'll continue?
If you wish, if we take too many, then I will speak an hour or so. So let us take these three.
Then we'll come
Okay,
back over
okay.
here. Yeah, so go ahead, Dorato.
Okay, so I will try to be short because in order to have also to listen also to views and also through the questions that can be also, I mean, in a way, a thought, express the thought. So the first on the workers' movement in general and its involvement in the struggle for peace. As you noticed, when I started speaking, I said fellow fighters for a world of peace and social justice. And World Peace Council is underlining, is emphasizing on that because, I mean, a world of peace. Who doesn't want to have peace? But even Donald Trump speaks about peace. He says, let's do peace. Let's do business with peace related. We want to have peace with social justice, not for the profits, not for the control of spheres of influence, for all these reactionary things the imperialists are doing, sometimes with wars and sometimes in peace, because their policies is not related necessarily openly always with killing, with war, let's say. But they know how to maneuver and how to impose their interests and their how to say domination, their hegemony, even when there is no war. But always threatening also that if people will not comply, will not go by the powerful imperialist states, then there is also war. It's sometimes also, let's say, the carrot and the stick. But speaking about workers' movements, the peace movement in each country cannot, as strong as it would be, and as it can grow, cannot mobilize awareness in society without the trade union, the organized workers in the trade unions. Of course, there are trade unions and trade unions. There is also trade unions which are, how to say, actually so much with the bosses that the trade union, the title trade union doesn't even fit or work. But in general, this dilemma that what about the working places? What about the jobs in the military industry? There is a whole complex compound of military industry in the US, where I guess from the size of the country, at least many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people are working. But this is really a pseudo dilemma. It's not a real dilemma. Because first of all, okay, there are weapons and weapons, and there are, let's say, more defensive weapons or clearly offensive weapons. But apart from that, I will not go to that discussion. Industry, in order to have jobs, in order to satisfy the needs of society, and so on, there is enough needs to be covered and enough things to be done in a different, how to say, economy, in it with different priorities and with different setup and mind. So it's true that it is a challenge. What workers believe But look, in Japan, the employees, the workers of Toyota or other multinational car producing factories, they're singing the anthem of Toyota or of that. That's also a thing. I mean, they are workers. Maybe the trade union even has um, accepted that, but that doesn't make it a workers class oriented workers movement. If they feel that their interests are going together with the, so it's clear from the angle and from the perspective of the peace movement, we are for disarmament, we are for reduction of the military expenses. We are not pacifists to say delete, destroy, dissolve all armies in the world, because we believe, I don't know, in love and peace, and we pray every Sunday or every Friday, and that's it. No, we are not naive, we are not innocent to believe that. But these 2 trillion US dollars a year, if they would be 1 trillion, which is again huge amount, and with this money, just with 10% of all these amounts, all hunger, all misery, all underdevelopment in Africa and in the rest of the world would be solved. So it is clear that we don't start from closing the factories who produce the weapons, but if the factories who produce the weapons in the US or Canada or Britain or France or Germany, which are the main producers and exporters of these weapons, yes, they are warmongers as well. So the industry of these enterprises, of these sectors, they are participating as well in crimes against the peoples and humanity. Now, to the UN, you see, it's funny. The World Peace Council has a consultative status in the framework of the United Nations. We are really defending the principles of the founding charter. But look at the principles of the founding charter. They are being trampled and violated day by day, and at least after 1991, after the correlation of forces changed internationally, the Soviet Union and the socialist camp was dissolved and fell away. International law is an issue. It's very relative. We insist in defending the resolutions because majority of those resolutions which we defend are coming, of course, from the before 1991 era, with a different correlation of force internationally. But yes, it is true that whatever space can be used, like the International Court of Justice for the file of South Africa against Israel, could be used. We support that file. And by the way, Cuba, this island with so many problems, as I said also in my speech, is supporting openly the case of South Africa in the ICJ. So let's give a look. Speaking about progressive governments, for example, in Latin America or around the world, to see who is really progressive. Now, who wants to show his progressiveness should support the South Africa's case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. It needs courage, if not to say another word which is being used in Latin America. It needs it, because you can speak about progress and even about revolution, but to confront the procurator, the best sheriff of United States and NATO imperialism in the Middle East, Israel, you need to do a little bit more than this. So as government, I mean. And this brings it now to the last question regarding NATO in relation to the genocidal war of Israel in Palestine and the massacres and the actually ethnic cleansing. You know, what Israel is applying, and it's actually supported by all its allies in Europe and North America and in the world. It is a country without people for a people without country. And this is not something I have invented and discovered. This is more than 100 and 130 years back. The the reactionary theories of Zionists. Normally, I don't use the word Zionism, but as an expression, philosophical, ideological, political term, as a current. Yes, they have invented these things. They were always thinking how to purge out, how to displace, how to kill, if necessary, the Palestinians. And now you see suddenly a president called Donald Trump is coming saying, We will take the Gaza because it's nice, it has summer, it has sun. It is like the Riviera of the Middle East, but we cannot send troops there to take the Palestinians away. But we will ask our friends to do it, Netanyahu. And Netanyahu really, probably he didn't tell them that he will propose such a thing. He fell from the sky. He said, "This is wonderful. This is the best president, the best ally I have ever seen." And that shows also that he was probably not informed, because Israel has never dreamed of that a leader of a superpower like the United States would do the ethnic cleansing for them with a little bit more business approach, because they say Riviera, hotels, business, and so on. But some Palestinians have to leave because they are really annoying us. So NATO is fully in line and behind Israel. It's not only that they are getting the weapons; they are not getting the weapons and the money only from the United States. They are getting it also from Britain, from France, from Germany, and above all, the political support and endorsement. There is a unanimity and a unanimous approach to the so-called claim, the right for self-defense. Okay, the right to self-defense in 18 months' crime. Maybe there was a right to self-defense in the first week after 7th of October. Let's take this option. Is it the right for self-defense to kill 45,000 people and 1/3 of them children? Of course, it's not a right to self-defense. That's genocide. That's ethnic cleansing. But the right to resist the occupiers is granted by international law. And where is that? I mean, where would history of humanity have gone if the Vietnamese who were resisting American troops in the 60s, or earlier the French in the 40s, 50s, or Greece, my country, with the Nazi occupation in the 40s, in the early 40s? Is there a right to occupy the occupation, to resist the occupation, or not? At the end, what is international law? And all this hypocrisy, all these double standards within NATO and within the European Union is clear. So NATO cannot take its responsibility out when it comes to Palestine. It is fully involved, and their hands are in blood, as it is the US and the European Union member states.
Let's take these two questions. Well, let's do three and then see where we're at after that for time. Yeah, here and then we'll go over here.
My question is, we're in because of the rhetoric about annexation of Canada and the 51st state, and there's real character being implemented, there's a kind of novel moment of fear and nationalism in the country. So, anti-Russia, anti-China. Reducing those characters.
Thanks. Great question.
Peace movement and also trading movement. We just saw last week the gun strike. That was an amazing show of force from the people. We've seen blockades, armament shipments to Ukraine. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the nationalism increase. The tactics that we've spoken about here tonight that have fine.
Now that Syria is free, we're seeing all the global things happening there. We come at bringing this up. People are thinking about it started or that. And I'm just like, is it better though? And I want to you believe all of these dungeon fortress stories And is it worth it? Because I don't think it's ever going to be full nation again, in my opinion. Feel like it's worse off. So that. Because
Yes. So I don't really know how to. It's also a new, let's say, new phenomenon. This Trump versus Canada, or to incorporate into the U.S. 51st state. To be honest, of course, I know that Canada is an independent state. Also, on your money, there is Queen Elizabeth or King Charles. But because I came with some old Canadian dollars to Canada, I have still the Queen Elizabeth on it. And I was told this is old money, by the way. You should update your Canadian dollars. No, apart from that, to bring a little bit more humor into the discussion. But more, which is not political, but it is political. I was speaking today with my comrade and brother Dave. Why I like basketball. Why in the North American, the U.S. American Basketball League is the Toronto Raptors? Why don't you have your own basketball championship in Canada, by the way? So that doesn't mean that because your basketball team is in the U.S. league that you have to go. But I'm saying, look, and the same is valid in 2, 3, 4, 5 other aspects where U.S. and Canada are very, very close to each other and so on. Or people say you are the younger brother or the younger cousin or whatever, and then the elder brother and cousin is somehow dominating and so on. Look, this is happening, by the way, in a different style. Now, I'm not changing the subject. There is the European Song Contest, the Eurovision. Huh? You know who participates there? Israel. And I like more than basketball, the soccer, the football, what we call football in Europe. And they are participating team and of Israel. It's crazy. I mean, geographically, this is not about Israel or not Israel, but Israel is in the Middle East. So, but it's participating in the European Song Contest. These are political things, yeah. In the Middle East or by continent strictly, it is the Asian continent. So, what I want to say, fact is that these declarations of this president and so on, it's about tariffs, about profits, about the competition of the American companies towards Canadians, and to show off also, and a renegotiation of things to stabilize things, because they don't want really to go on a war. I mean, literally, because I think the question implied also expenses. Somebody would say, is it now good to, I don't know if the bourgeois political parties in Canada are using that now we have to increase our military expenses as Canada because we are being threatened by Trump. Aha, okay, now I got it. But of course, that's very cheap. It's very cheap because I don't know what percentage of the military expenditure of this 1.4, 1.5% of your GDP today, which is for military, what part of it is being spent? Let's say it's also difficult to determine. Not only that, I don't know, but for NATO purposes, yes. But if Canada buys tomorrow, how many was it? 50 new F-35, and 135 costs so much. Is that for the defense from the United States? Of course not. It's in order to participate in military operations of NATO or of alliances of the willing, 4, 5, 6 other countries. So NATO is a reliable partner, and when the U.S. needs its participation or its planes or its equipment, which is sold by U.S. to Canada for that purpose, not for any defense. From where is Canada being threatened? From Alaska? Which, from? Yes. So it's clear that this is. I think it's not so difficult to confront and to reveal this hypocrisy And of course, it's weird, really. It's a situation we can't foresee now the next things, what will happen regarding this US presidency. I understand that national feelings or nationalist feelings will be, how to say, pushed up, also in order to cover up anti-popular, anti-workers measures. I heard the interesting thing now when I was in Montreal that yes, because Trump will impose tariffs, the bosses and the entrepreneurs, the elite, the economic elite of Canada is saying, in order to be able to compete, to save the job places, we have to reduce the salaries so that we can compete, because if we increase the prices of our products, nobody will buy them. And so we don't do revenues, we don't do incomes, we don't do profits. So it is a very sophisticated and very clever, how to say, organized. In either way, the entrepreneurs, whether Canadian or US, will not lose. The question is if the workers will win. The question is if the workers can organize and fight back this. Now, in Syria, I think things are clear. This situation today, the new regime of al-Shara or al-Jolani, now he's using now his real name. Also, his previous name was how to say, the competent the name. Yeah. What? Pardon?
Mohammed
Al-Shara, yes. And nickname alias al-Jolani. So this guy, he was. I'm not expert in this. How to say, groups, Nusra, Al Qaeda. He was in all of them. He was involved with all of them. But I think I don't know how much money the US put on his head. He was wonder. 10 million. 10 million US dollars. So from a wanted person for $10 million, and now he's how to say, welcomed. He's wearing a tie and a suit and meeting all the international leaders in Damascus and abroad and so on and so on. So it is clear it was a handover, it was a handover and takeover. But the takeover was not really by military terms. Yes, there were his militias, or the militias, the most organized of all the Islamist groups, were apparently this Al-Jolani's group. There was in northwest of Syria, in the Idlib region, where Turkey was in control. Turkey was recycling jihadists and holy fighters and how to say, armed fundamentalists, recycling them, sending them to Libya, coming back, sending them to fight inside Syria, sending them to fight in the borders with Iraq, etc. Preparing what happened finally in December when they went to Doha, finally on foreign minister level. There were the visible participants in the meeting and the invisible. The invisible were United States and Israel, because nobody wants to sit with the United States and Israel on the table, but they were there, they were just in the next room, let's say. So the visible part was, of course, the Qatari host, the United Arab Emirates, the Saudis, the Turkish, and the Russia, with Lavrov himself, the foreign minister, which agreed on everything. And they said the message to the previous regime, to Bashar al-Assad, that, look, it's over, game over. Now, is it now the most important to discuss about the previous regime? It's not. It's not. We can tell if you want. We can tell, but I think it's not worth now to say, look, there was a lack of this, and there was a lack of this, and there was a lack of. There were a lot of lacks in questions of democracy, civil liberties, and so on and so on. But I can tell you, this country, Syria, under the rule and the regime of the Assad father and son, was the most secular and most, how to say, open-minded society. Here, majority, more than the half of the participants are women. Women in Syria, they were really emancipated, educated, and free. Now, in the margins of the rule of the regime, whatever freedom and democracy exists, the women had no less rights. In Syria, for an Arab country in the Middle East, maybe it was the most, relatively speaking, the most developed in that sense regarding women emancipation or equal rights of women whatsoever in the conditions of the Arab world. So, and there cannot be even 1 second or 1% doubt that the life of people today in Syria and already after the first weeks of how to say smooth, let's say, transition, now we can see the new face of the regime. That the life would be today in any sense better than before, and it will not be better. They want to apply now on Syria a model like it was in Idlib, which means with a Turkish neo-Ottoman, how to say, spirit, to create a Syria which the business will be run by Turkish companies. The money, the Turkish lira, is already circulating in Syria, not only in Idlib, in the whole country. And the country will be not saying a single word for the violation of its own sovereignty and territorial integrity by Israel. Israel is advancing and occupying much beyond the Golan Heights. And the new Al-Jolani regime is not saying a word. The new regime in Syria doesn't say a single word on Palestine. They're brothers. So a massacre was taking place still before the ceasefire in Gaza. Now a slow motion massacre and genocide is taking place in the West Bank. The regime doesn't say anything because it's so much bound and so much part of the deal which was elaborated in Doha. That, so look, comrades now and friends, about Greece, we would need really much more time. I don't want to take, and it's not that I wouldn't like to tell, but I want also to avoid a misunderstanding that a Greek representative of the Peace Council is coming in order to praise itself. No, but I will tell a few things. This tragic crash of 2 trains in Greece 2 years ago, which has triggered for all these 2 years, but especially in the last 2 months again, with some new information which were revealed on the causes of this tragedy, which was actually, in that sense, a crime, because 57 mostly young people died. This is a route, Athens, Thessaloniki, of our 2 major cities of our small country. I have taken, I don't know, hundreds of times this train, and all people are taking this train, and their sons and daughters are taking this train. The people felt very much attached to it. But the main elements why the people are starting getting very angry and unhappy with the government, which is covering and trying to close it down and to went and how to say, destroyed the crime scene so that no evidence will be produced later into public and so on. The most important things are that this train company, there was a public train company which has the network, the buildings, the trains, the employees, the maintenance, everything was state-owned. Then they started cutting it into 4 pieces, selling the profitable parts to private investors, and the non-profitable, because if you cut it in 4 pieces, I know that's the same business everywhere. If you cut the state enterprise into 4 pieces and the profitable you give it, and they sold, the funny thing is, think about Greek government. The government of the conservative government before 2015 was trying to sell that company, that part, the operational part, the trains, okay? Because that is the profitable one, to sell tickets and so on. Was trying to sell it for around 300 million euros, okay, something like that. And then the so-called left-wing government came in 2015 and sold that part for 45 million. And when there was a dispute in parliament, and the right wing said, "Hey man, you accused us for 300 million selling selling our silver, the silver of the family. And now you're selling it for 45? And the response of Syriza was, yes, because with your policies, the value of the company went so much down that we couldn't sell it for more. Okay, then don't sell it. So no, but they had to sell it because there was a commitment with the Troika and with the creditors and so on, and say privatize, sell it out. So behind the crime of this crash, where two trains came in one line, is actually the privatization, the one thing, and the automatically, if you privatize, then you don't employ people, you don't train people, you don't secure standards, and so on. So this now came into a strike, general strike. Greece, my country, my people, have never seen this thing. 1 month ago, it was huge, and now it was almost double. Athens, literally, not for propaganda purpose, more than 450, maybe 500,000 Athens. Okay, Thessaloniki, my hometown, in the first one month ago, maybe 35,000, and now 200,000. Thessaloniki has the particular thing that it was one of the ends of the the train route from Athens to Thessaloniki. So many people were affected in Thessaloniki and so on. So it is really, so we can't say, I wish we could, but we can't say that this is creating now a new, let's say, a new level of class conscience of the trade unions and of the people's movement and so on. That is too early to say and too difficult to say. But it is creating a new fertile grounds where class-oriented trade unions, also the, how to say, communists and people who feel really disgusted by these policies and this taxation and this rule of profits and capitals and so on, such people can, how to say, work more in order to achieve more awareness, in order to rally broader forces, in order to have more deep and radical changes. Mm-hmm. But it's not so easy. But you are right, and I thank you for that. This has never, this not in my age, even the elder comrades and brothers and sisters have never seen this in Greece. Even in 1944, after the liberation actually from Nazi occupation forces, which was a critical moment in 1944 in Athens, where it was massive. But those days, imagine now that Athens of 80 years ago had a different population and people were not able. Now it's totally different. So it is.
For over a million with the spirit of art.
No, not in Athens. All over the country, 1.5. In Athens, 500,000, which is.
They burned the whole city of Athens.
Yeah.
And many politicians of the New Democracy Party, the government, resigned because the main was for the government to resign.
Yeah, I haven't seen this news that ministers have resigned, but probably it is like that because government is under pressure. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I think that is a good moment to end, but we can linger in the space for a little bit longer. But wait, hold on. I have another half an hour intervention here. Just one final reminder on your way out to please donate. Every little bit helps, and please welcome and congratulate.
Thank you. Would you be to do a good survey? Yes, we can.